Hey guys, welcome back to Tin Cup Outdoors. Today we'll be going through the video archive to find some unused footage from our last trip. We'll be exploring the Fort Smith National Historic Site along with downtown Fort Smith. Starting off, we'll be visiting the original military post of Fort Smith. This was founded in 1817 by the War Department. They said it was to impose some federal forces between the Osage and the Cherokee Indians, but I can't help but think it was just to put a foothold in the area for further western expansion. The reason I say that is because 7 years after building the first fort, it was abandoned, and then they moved into Oklahoma to build Fort Gibson. So according to legend, in the spring of 1821, the Osage leader Bad Tempered Buffalo, I don't know who named him that, but anyway, he appears across the river with about 400 warriors all dressed up in war paint. He rows across the river and requests gunpowder and the permission to hunt on Cherokee land. The acting fort commander at the time denied the request, and the Osage left the fort. Then the Osage proceeded to build some rafts and appeared like they were preparing for attack. The fort was outnumbered about 10-1, so they aimed their two measly little cannons over at the Osage, and luckily they packed up and left. So oral tradition in the tribe state that this was only a scare tactic to show the nearby Cherokee and the U.S. government of the Osage's presence. So by 1838, the settlers in the area of Fort Smith had continuing fears of Indian violence. The Army began to build a second fort near the ruins of the first. It was occupied by the Confederate and then later the Union troops in the Civil War, but by 1871 it was no longer needed by the military, so it was handed over to the federal court for the Western District of Arkansas. This was the largest criminal jurisdiction of any federal court at the time. The Western District of Arkansas handled an extraordinary number of murder cases, and at the time, federal law mandated the death penalty for anyone found guilty. Inside the restored federal building, they have a recreation to kind of show what it looked like 200 years ago. After presiding over 79 executions and sentencing over 100 men to hang, Isaac C. Parker was nicknamed the Hanging Judge. Being a federal court, executions took place here for about 24 years. 160 people were sentenced to hang, with about half of them avoiding the gallows through pardons, reversals, or acquittals. George Mailden, dubbed the Prince of Hangmen, served as an executioner on about half of the hangings here. I'm sure he was a delightful man to be around. So the last building to look at is ironically the oldest one in Fort Smith. The commissary was built in 1838 by the U.S. military to store food and supplies. It's the oldest standing building in Fort Smith, although its appearance and use has changed over time. Leaving Fort Smith, we couldn't help but stop at the Railway Museum right across the street. Driving through town, leaving Fort Smith, I thought it was really cool to see how many huge murals were painted on the walls of buildings. Coming from a town that was based off a pretty bloody history, it's cool to see what Fort Smith has turned into. I'm looking forward to the day that I have a little bit more time to explore the rest of Fort Smith, but for now, that's it. Okay, that's it for Fort Smith. We just spent the day exploring the city. I'll say the coolest part I saw today in Fort Smith was all the murals. I really wasn't expecting that out of like a historic like war city kind of, but that was pretty cool. Definitely unexpected. It's been a 2.5 hour drive home, so we are hitting the road to get home as soon as possible.